You're back. Live from New York. It's a show that's 100% right about several things. It's First Things First. Today.
I'm not sure she had many doubters. I mean, we all know about Jay Williams' comment, she can't be great unless she wins a ring. And I think even deep inside, he would walk that one back.
Yep.
I don't think he has publicly,
Sure.
but great. If you want to say the GOAT, okay, that's another debate. We'll get to that a little later. But great? She's clearly great. Saying Caitlin Clark's not great is like saying Einstein wasn't smart.
Wow.
I mean, she's that great. All right, I'm proud of that. Good pull. No, but I think one thing, because we can't assume, even though obviously the popularity of the game for women is skyrocketing, we can't assume everybody knows what her game is like. All right, so in specifically asking me about last night, a lot of people may think she's just a scorer because she broke the scoring record, right? But when you saw last night, she is a great passer, too. She had, in addition to the 41 points, the 12 assists. The game before against Colorado, she had 29 points, 15 assists. She's averaging 10 assists in the tournament. And she is not just, and I don't mean this in a negative way on these guys, but like an Allen Iverson, Russell Westbrook, who would pass, they would be looking for a bucket, draw attention, double, triple team, and kick it to a teammate, kind of as a last resort for assists. She is a real playmaker. Like, she has court vision. She throws pinpoint passes, sometimes even kind of passing players open. Like, she is a great passer in addition to absolutely. Yep. So I think you had to see that. And also, if there was any doubt, because some people were throwing out Juju Watkins, Paige Beckers, at who's the best player in the country, it's clearly Caitlin Clark. On a night when Angel Reese was on the court, who played well, but she's not as good as Caitlin Clark, Beckers and Juju played later that night. And Beckers was great, and Juju played well too. But clearly, Caitlin Clark is the best player in the country. And this graphic kind of sums it up. Look at the number of teammates. So these are the top 50 recruits when they were coming out of high school, like a 4 or 5 star, think of that way. Top 50 recruits. Iowa has 2, including Caitlin Clark.
She's got one teammate.
One teammate who was top 50. LSU, 5 of them. Yep. UConn, 7. South Carolina, 7. Yep. And she's running through the tournament. So this is somewhat like a Larry Bird when he carried. It's not quite as much because Iowa's been a good program, but the way he carried Iowa or Indiana State in 1979. So I thought she showed all of that last night.
And listen, Kim Mulkey is getting some criticism today, a little bit of it fair, of why didn't you switch up the defensive scheme, maybe have Flaugier on her more. Haley obviously was having Haley had a rough tournament. I like Haley Van Lith. I liked her attitude last year. I liked the way she stood up for her teammates this year. She shot 20% for the tournament and had a rough game offensively last night, and defensively had no answers. So maybe Mulkey could have switched some things up, but one of the reasons it wasn't just blitz Caitlin doubler is because of what Brew's talking about. She's such a good passer and such a willing passer that wouldn't have necessarily solved your problem. This was a legendary performance by a legendary player. Caitlin Clark has 2 career 40-point double-doubles or triple-doubles. They have both come in the Elite 8 in back-to-back years. Last year against Louisville and then last night. Wilds, your point yesterday that I didn't mean to, but jumped on you a bit on as far as, well, as far as, I wasn't really trying to call you a fool. I didn't like the discussion that I was seeing, which was essentially saying her greatness is predicated on this result. Because to me, her greatness was already established. But part of that point is correct, which was you could argue this was the biggest game of her career. Bigger than the national title game. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but because this team had beaten her, because everyone came back, because this was a team, because now she already was, instead of last year, she was player of the year, but the story and legend was growing. Now she is a legend. She's broken the records. If you then have the same team beat you back-to-back years, but this one before even the Final Four, it's going to feel a little funny that that's the way the Iowa career ends. Instead, she had one of, I don't think it's but one of the greatest games of her career. And here's the other thing I'm going to say about Caitlin Clark, which I think is so cool for women's sports and for sports in general, but particularly this moment for women's sports. I would argue for a decade, young basketball players, not all, but many, have said, God dog it, I want to be Steph Curry. And no one has succeeded, and now she has.
That's a good take.
We have seen so many male players be like, I want to play like that guy. I want to take off the bounce, unbalanced, deep threes, and have them be good shots. And no one has succeeded doing it.
Trae Young's trying.
I was going to bring up Trae. And he's not close because he's not efficient.
Correct.
He doesn't win.
Right. And his shooting, Trae Young, his assist numbers are excellent.
Right.
His shooting percentage will shock you if you actually look at it. Even on those great playoff runs, his three-point numbers. She's doing it. Yeah. She is doing it as, like, and it's, to me, that is the cool part of this. It was that basketball players, men and women, or boys and girls in this case, young people, looked at Steph Curry, and a lot of them said, I'm not going to be the biggest person out there. I'm not going to be the most athletic. How can I be the most dominant? And the first person to kind of pull that sword from this stone
That's a good take.
is Caitlin Clark.
Yep.
And that to me is so dope that she was 11 years old, I would imagine, watching Steph Curry be like, that's the game that I'm going to do. While a lot of 11 and 12-year-old boys were doing the same thing, and she nailed it first.
You know what I liked, Brew? The makes are obviously the makes. She had a few misses that were still intimidating, I think, to LSU. And it's very Steph-like, where it's like, I'm going to space the floor so deep, and we see Dame do it too, so wide and so deep, where it's like, now you're going to have to cover me out here. If I make it, you're like, oh, demoralized, like, what can I do?
Right.
If I miss it, there's still so much space for me to operate. I thought it was great. Brew, do you have a final word, or you want to talk about my take again from yesterday?
I want to hear your take from this one.
So now we move on to where does Caitlin belong in this ranking of all-time players, and does she need a title? So yesterday I argued that she does. Here's sporting news. There's a lot of different rankings. We picked sporting news of best player, women's college basketball players ever. Number 1, Breanna Stewart. She had 3 Players of the Year, won 4 titles with UConn. Cheryl Miller, Shamika Holtzclaw, Diana Taurasi, Candace Parker. Brittany Griner had 2 Players of the Year, only won 1. Now, Caitlin Clark has 1 Player of the Year last year. We expect her to win it again.
She's going to win it this year, so that'll be 2.
But it'd be weird if she had 0 titles.
So here's why I don't think she needs to win a title. I want
to be the GOAT.
Well, I think to be in. I think to where if you say I want to be clear here. I don't look at women's basketball like hockey, where there is an undisputed, clear greatest ever. I don't look at it like the NBA, where there is an undisputed, clear, you can only make an argument for 3 guys at most. I think that list is a fair list, and I also think some people might throw Sue Bird on there. I think some, you know what I mean? Like that list is, it is a lot of people. The reason that I think Caitlin is already in the conversation is, and this is why I get frustrated with the count the rings stuff. Let's show that graphic again if we could. And again, in your mind's eye, imagine that there's a 2 for Naismith Player of the Year for Caitlin, because she's going to win it this year. And then I'm going to add a column. And that's WNBA teammates. And obviously, Cheryl is in a unique spot because the WNBA didn't exist. So she
had tremendous teammates.
Yeah, that's what I would imagine. Right. Cynthia Cooper, who might have been the greatest WNBA player ever. But okay. So what you're going to notice is, so wait, the only person on the list who doesn't have multiple titles is Brittany Griner. She's the only person on the list whose entire starting 5 wasn't future pros. Caitlin Clark, now again, Caitlin's number could grow greater than 0 because, you know, when her class graduates, some of them could go on. But to me, Brew, what she did last year, and I apologize for going longer, I just want your opinion on this. Beating South Carolina last year was more impressive than if someone else beat South Carolina and then Caitlin won the national title. South Carolina, going into that game, had won 42 straight games. Since that game, they've won 36 straight games. Over the last 2 years, South Carolina is 72-1. The one loss was to Caitlin Clark. South Carolina has pros All over it. Last year, the #1 pick of the draft. This year's got more people. She has, and we can show you her numbers in her biggest games. If we can pull that up real quick, Hubs, in Elite 8 Final Four national championship games, what she's averaging. It's not that she hasn't shown up. It's not that she hasn't been great in the biggest moments. Here's what she's done in her 4 career biggest games. Oh, pretty good.
Yeah.
And so that's, yes, a national title, Brew, would be the, I don't want to say the icing on the cake because I know it's more than that. But the circumstance in a team sport has to be factored into it.
It's a great argument. Brew's going to be with me. Watch this.
Yeah, I was going to say, look, it is, because we're talking GOAT now. Yesterday we were talking established all-time great, which you and I were like, she's already that, regardless of what would have happened last night. GOAT is a different conversation. And look, I don't claim to be an expert on women's basketball history. All right, I don't have the airtight, foolproof, undisputable argument for the women's GOAT like I do for the men's GOAT, right, George? Right, that one's airtight. There's no debate.
Yeah.
All right, but for this, what comes to my mind, the person that comes to my mind is Cheryl Miller.
Me too.
Because she was just, I mean, she won 2 championships. Now, she won them when she was freshman and sophomore when she had those great teammates, but she still won it. She was just legendary and mythical. I'm not going to sit here and act like I was watching her all the time in the early 80s, okay, or mid-80s. But I'll say this, and I have watched, you know, a decent amount of the women's college game and pro game. Caitlin Clark is the best player I've ever seen. And I'm keeping it to college. I'm not compared to WNBA. She's the best player I've seen. And you're right, she is like Steph. She's very much like Steph Curry. I mean, he's a great passer, too. You don't see it as much because of their offense. But she's very much like Steph, except, and we were talking about this before the show, she's the equivalent of probably a guy that's 6'6" in men's basketball, because she's 6 feet tall in women's basketball. All right, so it's like that's why she fills up the box score, and not like, you know, Steph doesn't really do it because of his size. And so I think she's the best I've seen. However, Nick, there's not a basketball discussion, I don't think, where we don't put, when we're talking about GOAT, where we don't include rings. It's not the end-all, be-all, but we include rings. I can't say she's the greatest college player ever, even though that's what my eyes tell me, unless she's got a ring. And Iowa's not Indiana State.
No, I'm not saying Iowa's Indiana State.
Vivian Stringer was there. You know, they've been a good program.
I'll be honest, I didn't know Vivian Stringer was there, but shout out to Brew for
they're not UConn or Tennessee, but they have been a good program.
This is where Wilds making fun of me because he was like, your brain works like this on all things. That I am not just process over results on a lot of things, but also taking things to its furthest logical conclusion, which is, if we are saying you can't be in the discussion without a ring, then we are saying then take it further. So if she averaged 60 a game, no, but so wait.
That'd be impressive. If she scores 60 and gets knocked out by UConn.
Pistol Pete averaged like 40. Nobody ever said he was
great.
No,
I understand that, but that's different. To me, that's a different story, because we were saying that he was playing a selfish brand of basketball, that he wasn't playing winning basketball. Nobody thinks that. Like, do you guys buy into at all anything that the most impressive win in the women's game over the last 2 years was Caitlin's win over South Carolina? It just came around early.
Yeah. But here's the thing, Nick. If she averaged, to your point, 60, then you look at it like, okay, there's a clear gap. Well, the other names on that list that you both of you showed, they're great players in their own right, too. Now, I think Caitlin is better, but it's not like you look at them like, man, they not
I know, but she already has, by a huge margin, the highest scoring tournament ever last year. If she makes the final this year, she's going to break her own record in that. So, like, she's going to have the 2 highest scoring tournaments ever. I guess my point is,
it's like quarterback.
She won 2 games.
Say it again.
She's got to win 2 more games.
But South Carolina, so she has to. So
she has to be the greatest ever and surpass all of them.
I'm just again. I'm not even saying, by the way, if she wins, she is the greatest ever. What I'm saying is if you cannot have the conversation about who the greatest female college basketball player is without including her name. There is not a definitive, clear-cut number one. I agree with you on Cheryl Miller, but that is just because it's. when I did my NBA list, I was able to go back and watch stuff. I can't with Cheryl. I just I trust people, right? I was at Shamiko Holtzclaw's Final Four game when the Jolly Girl hit all the threes. I watched women's college basketball growing up. I was at some of those games. So I feel like I actually know a lot about the UConn and Tennessee teams. I feel like she's the best I've seen. And the idea that, well, if this South Carolina team that has lost once in 3 years beats her after she beat them last year, she's out of the discussion.
It's tight. Well, she can be in the discussion, but that's going to be, I think,
would be a disappointment, would it not?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a point that she can't overcome in the discussion. Is that
South
she doesn't have any rings.
South Carolina's the best team. They've been the best team. They should have won it last year.
Friday, 9 o'clock, UConn, Iowa. Okay, talking about Angel Reese now, 17 points, 20 rebounds, and 4 blocks after the game. She opened up about the mental toll of criticism and scrutiny that she's faced. Take a listen. Brew, your reaction.
Well, it's just very sad that, I mean, winning the national championship should be one of the highlights of her life. And for her to say she hasn't had peace since then, it's just terrible. It's heart-wrenching, all right? And we know last year there was a controversy, and that's, to me, kind of when it began.
The start.
When there was
doing this in front of Caitlin.
And people jumping all over her and saying nothing about Caitlin Clark doing it. That was racism, and I think it was classism, too. Because if she was some suburban black girl who was, you know, acted differently, I don't know if it would be as people would be on her as much. So I think it's unfortunate she's going through that. There was the article in the LA Times that compared the LSU players, the dirty debutantes. And I don't think the writer meant it in a pornographic way, but people said once you Googled it, and Kim Mulkey said it, you Google it, it turns to pornography. So I don't think he really meant it that way. I don't think he knew it, because that wasn't the thing that came to my mind. I just thought he's trying to turn a phrase. But she's the reason, not that, you know, because she's kind of the face of that team, and he was looking negatively at that team because of what he thinks about her. And for her to have to go through that, like Kim Mulkey said, it is terrible that college kids have to go through this. Now, I will say this. As you become more popular, and as women's basketball is becoming more and more popular, they will also get some of the negatives that come with popularity in terms of, I mean, LeBron James is the greatest example. He is an awesome player, obviously, but with his stature has come a whole bunch of criticism and scrutiny that he has to have. It should be different with college kids, and a lot of times it is. Like, when I wrote, I would not criticize college kids or certainly high school. Yeah, the same way pro. They're not getting paid. I know they are now with NIL, but they're not professionals. And so it should be different in that regard. But it's just, you know, it's unfortunate. And a lot of what she's talking about also is social media. Not just traditional media.
I think that's almost all of it. I think the LA Times article was, you know, maybe the straw that broke the camel's back publicly. I say this as, and I'm not trying to be preachy, and I empathize with Angel Reese, but my 2 older kids are sandwiched around her age. I have an 18-year-old and a 25-year-old. And this is what I say to them. This is what I say to young people watching, adults watching too, but particularly young people. You gotta log off. And I'm not blaming Angel Reese at all, but those death threats, the sexualization, I bet 98% of it, if not 100% of it, did not come from her walking down the street and someone saying it to her. It is people who live in your phone who are terrorizing you. Right. And I say this as someone who has been, in some ways, in the public eye for 20 years, okay? When I started, the social media did not really exist. It grew during my time on the air. And about 6 years ago, I logged off. And by that, I mean, I didn't stop posting, but I stopped reading anything that is written about me because it was driving me crazy. It was negatively impacting my mental health, my interactions with other people, how I thought of myself as a grown man who opted into the spotlight. for young people who are kind of all of a sudden celebrities. Nobody's prepared for it.
Right.
And anyone that's like, oh, ignore it, I'm here to tell you it's not ignorable if you read it. Human beings are not equipped to deal, for all of human civilization, you did not have to deal with strangers saying terrible things to you. We didn't evolve to know how to deal with it. All of a sudden, anyone in the public eye gets it. And I'm here to tell you it's awful for you. And that if you consume it, right, and if you consume it, it will negatively impact you. The problem is, Wilds, the flip side to it is the dopamine kick of the strangers saying good things to you. And in order to get that, you got to take the other, but it's killing kids. Literally. It's literally killing kids. And so I feel so terribly for her.
Right.
And I'll add just one thing, because you did a lot of like, you have to log off. And I just want to contrast it to what Bruce said about the LA Times article. The LA Times article was out of bounds. The author apologized in its old school print media, and several people in the old school print media and on social media was like, that's out of bounds. Yeah. The LSU coach, like, that's out of bounds. Everyone's like, that's out of bounds. An LA Times writer apologized, said that was out of bounds. The stuff that Angel Reese is going to has to deal with on her phone is 100x worse than that, and there's no one there saying that's out of bounds. So there is part of it where you're saying log off. There is a responsibility, and this is way out of sports, and we apologize, but give us a minute. There is a responsibility to companies that are making money off of this, that are making billions of dollars in Silicon Valley, to policing and regulating this, whether it is by legislative action or simple disincentives that need to be cooked into these programs. When the fact that LA Times, I just thought it was interesting, the fact that LA Times was out of bounds and everyone's like quickly squashed it, and the amount of stuff that was just popping up last night.
Well, and when she says sexualized, what she's talking about is like whack-a-mole. You can't block them all. People on the internet photoshopped her SI pictures into pornographic images. Oh, wow. You know what I mean? Those types of, and that is just, you know what I mean? One of and the death threats are too many, bot accounts to count. And I know from afar, people can see it and say, well, they're not real death threats. Are you actually afraid? And I am telling you, as a near 40-year-old man who opted into the spotlight, that it was driving me crazy. I can't imagine if I was a 20-year-old kid who just, got thrust into the spotlight all of a sudden, and I have political figures and anonymous people, everyone telling me what an awful person I am. It would drive you crazy.
No, you're absolutely right about logging up. Like, I don't pay attention to the criticism. I don't, you guys know I'm not on social media like that. I post. Right, I post. But human beings are not meant, this was something somebody told me, and I totally believe it, for excessive, I'm talking about super excessive praise
or criticism.
And that is what she's getting, incredibly excessive criticism on social media. And it's easier for us, especially me, because we didn't grow up, even you guys didn't grow up with social media. She did. To her, it's like television. Like for us, we can't even imagine not having television. To them, that age, that's what it's like. But she has to do it for her mental health, as you said.
More first things first. Right after this, we're going to talk about the Patriots.
Is that good for your mental health?
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get more from the show and to check out clips from other shows on FS1.